So, welcome back to the 30-Second Success Podcast, where clarity, courage, and connection come to life through the decisions that define us. I'm your host, Laura Templeton, and today we're diving into the bold, messy, meaningful moments that help us move forward in business and in life. So, let's jump in with my good friend, Daniel Andrews. Daniel is the founder at Cutting Edge Business Coaching, LLC, and I am blessed to have known him for several years now. We met through, obviously, a networking organization. So I'm thrilled that Daniel and I have stayed connected, even though our networks we've shifted and moved around. And Daniel, why don't you go ahead and share your 30-second message with us? Tell us who you are, who you serve, and the impact you are here to make.
Thank you very much. Well, in business, we all recognize that the best business comes from introductions, connections, and referrals. But the challenge is that most people don't approach relationships in a way that makes receiving introductions repeatable, dependable, and predictable. So I show folks how to turn the network they have into a predictably profitable source of strategic business development on less than 5 hours a month.
Love that. Predictably profitable resource, right? That's what your network is really about. Like, we have to remember that at the end of the day, we still have to do business, right? We still have to stay in business, and our network can actually help us to meet our profit goals. And I love that. So we're definitely going to be talking more about that. So share with us a little bit, maybe something that would surprise people to learn about you.
To learn about me. Oh, wow. That relationships is not my natural strong suit. I had to learn how to do this well. I'm in my hometown of Columbus, South Carolina. I've been back for about 10 years. Ran a business here in the 90s for 13 years. And when I first came home, there were two contradictory experiences. One is that 25% of my clients my first year were former employees or customers from my previous business here in this town, which I think says something about the way I dealt with and treated these people over that timeline. But there was also a number of people that said, wait a minute, Daniel Andrews is coaching relationships? Is that the same Dan Andrews from the 90s that used to work here in this town? Because as my first wife used to put it, I used to be better in small doses. She said, Daniel's good in small doses. And so the fact that I'm out here teaching strategic relationship development is a shock to some people, but it's because I ran into settings where it was learn that or forever be cold calling. And I'm like, I'm not going that route. And so I took the time to slow down and figure out what wasn't working and what was working, and then pursue more and more of the strategies that do work. So yeah, the fact is this is not a natural gift for me, but I think that actually brings me strength as a coach, because I know what it looks like to not be very good at this, or probably more accurately, to misunderstand some of the principles behind this. Right.
I love that. I love that. And I think that, there's so much power in taking what we've learned and then sharing it with others. And when you find that it works well for you, you can't help but share it. Right. I think that's the power of, of what we do. So I love that. So take us back to a 30-second decision that has changed everything for you. What happened in that moment and what came next?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I was kind of hoping I would have a chance to tell this story. So I will tell it in its briefest form. But this was a business to business setting where we were searching for an engagement. It wasn't a one-off sale, it was an engagement. And I was working in a community, a large city in America, that is actually very small town minded. They prefer to do business with people they went to high school and college with, and not outsiders, even though I'd lived there for 10 years. And but I found somebody who was local, who believed in what I did and understood the purpose of the work. And the industry I was in is not important. I will say that this was a business with 800 employees in 12 locations. So that tells you that's a big deal. No matter what industry you're in, that's bigger than average business. And we had, me and my wingman had pitched the owner and the CFO. And as typically the case in a B2B setting, let us think about it and come back, and talk to us again, and we'll make a decision. So me and the wingman and the prospect are standing on the parking lot of the prospect's business. And the prospect points at me and says, who is this guy? And my wingman doesn't look at me. He says, he's my guy. And the prospect points at me and says, but I don't know this guy. And the wingman says, but I know this guy. And the prospect says, but what happens if something happens to this guy? And my wingman says, I'll find another guy. And as I'm leaving, we came in separate cars. So I'm driving away and my feelings are hurt. I'm like, you're supposed to tell him how great I am and blah, 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 blah. And then I realized we got the deal. Maybe I don't need less people like that. Maybe I need more people like that, because I had thought that I was looking for the opportunity to talk about how good I was. But then I realized what we're doing is borrowing trust that other people have built. And the wingman knew that. And that's why he didn't look at me and he didn't let the prospect look at me. He said to the prospect, you and me. It's our
I love
relationship
that.
that makes this work. And I'm like, I need more of those. So rather than wait to stumble across that one, which I pretty much had, I decided to figure out what's the process by, how you create those people intentionally. So that was my moment. I'm like, don't get your feelings hurt. If that's the way to get the business, that's the way to get the business.
Right. I love that. And I love the idea of borrowing on the trust of the people in our network, right? When someone refers you, you and I've had deep conversations around
Mhm.
referrals,
Mhm.
and when you walk into a door where you've already been referred, it's a warm conversation because the trust has already been established by the person who's referring you. Now you are showing up and you're borrowing on their trust. And I think that's a beautiful revelation that you actually had in that moment.
And I think I'm going to kill that. Hopefully, yeah, that still works, doesn't it? I just didn't like the glare off my glasses, making me look kind of funny. Um, I think that what we miss is that we're trying to get to a person and then we want to figure out, how do I get to that person? We don't need names. Names are easy. You remember the day when they would throw a big book of names on your front porch. If you were B2C, B2B, didn't matter. You had everybody you needed, in a document that big every 12 months, right? Names are not the important part. Trust is the important part. What's being passed from person to person isn't a name. I will not accept a lead. Here, Dan, call this guy. He needs you. Mm-mm. But if you'll put me in a thread and you'll endorse me, then I'll be the first to call. It's not an ego move. It's that's meaningless. I don't need a name. I need the trust.
Right.
And when you say, this is my friend Dan, he's coached a lot of my peers, right? It's a skill I had mastered. I didn't need him, but I realized a lot of people do, and you're one of them. Right.
There you go.
Right.
Mm.
You should probably engage with him on how he can help you.
Mhm.
Right. That's what I'm looking for. And people miss that. That's what we're really looking for. Now, I don't ever want anybody to overstate the trust that they have in me. Right. Meaning, if we barely know each other, but you think that I sounded okay, and you could introduce me by saying, met Dan last week, but he had some interesting things to say. And I thought they might be important to you. I know he's got some good recommendations on his LinkedIn page. Why don't you take a look and see if you want to engage with him? Meaning, I don't want you to misstate the level of trust or conviction and confidence you have in me, but that's still better than zero, right?
I love it.
So,
I love it. And I think that's one of the things that those powerful conversations, the powerful introductions, and it reminds me of the conversation we've had around, teaching people how to introduce you. And you just gave a great lesson on that, right? You teach people how to introduce you. And I think sometimes that's the hardest thing for the people who want to introduce us. They're just not sure what to say. So I'm sure there you go. Like when you work with clients, and I do the same thing is, okay, here's who I'm looking to meet. Here's how you can introduce me. I love that. I love that you are taking that step, giving us examples. Thank you so much for that, because it's powerful. It is powerful when you help people understand the importance of how to introduce you based on the relationship you have.
correct. And that leads me, to expand that a little bit. I don't believe in a cut and paste. Meaning if you and I were discussing that you want to introduce me to Billy Bob, I would ask you why, what do you know about his needs or desires, right? What's your relationship with him? I would give you a template that I would expect you to modify, meaning I'm not going to give you a paragraph and expect you to use it indiscriminately, right? Because the value I have for Billy Bob is different than the one I have for Vicky Sue, right? Number one. And number two, your relationship might be different. It needs to sound like it came out of your mouth. But I will coach them in real time, meaning, when you say, yeah, people aren't sure how, and I'm open to additional information, but in my experience, and this is something I study every day, right? People go, you put a lot of thought into this. Well, this is how I get paid. So yeah, I do put a lot of thought into this. But once somebody is referable, or excuse me, once you become referable in someone else's mind, somebody has said to you, Laura, and you've heard this 100 or 1,000 times in your life, yeah. If I get any leads, I'll send them your way. And then nothing happens. People, yeah, what is up with that? And I go, well, it's easy to figure out because you've been that person too. Right? How many
Right.
times have you said it? And they're like, yeah, about the same numbers that's happened to me. I said, okay, so then let's talk about it. It's not a character issue. They didn't lie to you and said, oh, I'll send you leads with no intention to send you leads. They either weren't sure exactly who, they weren't sure exactly how, or they didn't put the time on their calendar. So I teach people to build the relationship correctly and then put the time on the calendar to discuss the who and the how. Right. I had a guy send me 3 names, right? He said, these are, he said he had booked the time to what I call a referral pairing. I used to call them a referral party, and people are going, how many people are going to be there? I'm like, me and you, right? There's 2 of us. So it's a referral pairing, right? And he sent me 3 names, and their LinkedIn profiles. So I looked at them. I said, these look pretty good. And he said, great, we'll talk about how to do it, during the referral pairing. So he came on the Zoom and he said, pull up those 3 again. I said, good. And I did. And I said, tell me a little more about this person and this person. And the first one, I said, I thought so, but the more you talk to me about him, he and I are actually we're very differently aligned. I really won't have anything to say to him that he's going to want to hear. And he's like, really? I said, yeah. Right. Because you gave me his demographic, but then you told me his demographic appeared in his LinkedIn profile, but now you've told me his psychographic. He's motivated by different things than I am. So I don't really have a conversation to have with him. And he's like, fascinating. I said, but that's why we discussed the who and the how, right? Because he could have made an introduction to me for somebody that would have just been a waste of both of our half hours, right? That guy would have gotten frustrated with me because he doesn't believe what I believe. I would have gotten frustrated with him because he doesn't see the light, the way I see it, right? Blah, blah, blah. So, if you discuss the who and the how, if you put time on the calendar, discuss the who and the how, you've covered all 3 problems. Not sure who, not sure how, and you didn't have the time on the calendar. So that's what I coach people around,
I love it.
is how to build
That's
that relationship
beautiful.
correctly and then book those referral pairings, which sounds like more work, but it's some work to get you some referrals is better than no work to get you no referrals.
Well, and here's the thing. I love the idea of referral pairings as opposed to coffee dates.
Oh my God. Please don't ever say the words virtual coffee to me. I'll throw up. Those are 2 very disrespectful words. Is number one, it's not virtual. It's real. It's digital, but it's not virtual. Virtual
Right.
implies not real. It's real. It's real time. It's digital. Coffee. No. It's a paired interview the first time we meet because we are
Mhm.
interviewing each other. And
Mm,
after that, if we believe in each other, it's a referral pairing where we're actively going to do it right. So I don't move to referral pairing the first time we meet people, but if we feel good about each other, we will schedule the referral pairing as our second meeting. And people go, how do you know that much about somebody right after one meeting? And I don't, but they were referred to me to start with. I'm inclined to believe in them to start with. So I only
I
need
love
one
it.
half-hour meeting before I determine if they're referable or not. Because Suzanne Taylor King and Laura Templeton, right, and Andrew Winnig never would have sent those people to me if they weren't capable of doing what they said they were going to do.
Right. I love that. Thank you. I think I've learned some new terminology from you here right now
Yeah,
because
right.
coffee dates and virtual coffees, just the terminology makes me a little crazy
It
because
does.
it's about getting to know people. It's about spending time with them, determining whether or not they're a good fit for you to continue the conversation with them.
That is
And
correct.
if not, you just want to bless them and let them go.
Exactly.
It's you gotta. It's about relationship, and I love that. So thank you. I love that terminology. I hope you don't mind me using it.
Sure. No. And I think terminology matters in so many places, meaning um, I have a very particular link on my Calendly, a description of a meeting type that is for the first get to know you meeting. And it's structured. So we're going to investigate each other and figure out, can we be supportive of each other and what may happen next? Right. And I don't just have a generic 20 or 30 minute, book on my calendar. Here's a generic 30 minutes because I want both of us to come into that meeting knowing why we're in that meeting.
Right.
Right. I probably have a half dozen 30-minute blocks on my calendar, but they each have a purpose and a meaning behind them. So if you're on my calendar, it's for that reason. And you and I both know what the reason is. And if we need to be reminded, it's in the description on the calendar so we can be reminded. And if we don't need to be reminded, it means that when we got on each other's calendar, we knew what the purpose of that call was in that moment. And therefore, it's so very different than just a generic, here's my 30-minute link, find 30 minutes. Well, what are you doing in those 30 minutes?
Mhm.
Oh, I'm going to try and
Yeah,
sell you
exactly.
something. No, you're not. I didn't sign it. Okay, but this link
Mhm.
means I'm going to try and sell you something. So only click
Yeah.
that button if you're ready for the sales pitch.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't do. I don't know if you've noticed it, but when I see people's calendar link, I always read the description, right? What's the purpose? And that's the perfect place to put, the description of the purpose of the call. How you're going to run it
Mhm.
should be part of that, right? And I think that's
Mhm.
beautiful. Thank you. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this episode, please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe to the podcast. Your support helps us reach more people with stories, strategies that inspire real connection. So, Daniel, what's a challenge you've had to overcome that most people don't see from the outside? I know you already
Well,
talked about relationships.
the main challenge is ADHD, but it's so clearly obvious. I don't think that people don't see that from the outside. Um, okay, here you go. The willingness to adhere to my own principles, meaning
Mm,
we've been saturated in the notion that networking is a subset of marketing, and building your network is not a subset of marketing. It is the actual literal opposite of marketing. And it's still about biz dev, but it's literally the opposite of marketing. And I still have to remind myself that just because you're invited to a networking event doesn't mean you have to go, right? But I mean, I'm an extrovert to start with, so I have fun, right? It's but we're culturally we're conditioned to think that getting in front of more people will ultimately be one of the keys to success. And the reality is no, getting in front of the right 6 people, 6 to 10 people. Right now, you might have to start with 24, but you're literally 24 virtual coffees, if I may make fun of that. You're literally 24 virtual coffees away from being in a system where you've got all the referrals you ever need, more than you can service in this lifetime. And people go, what? I mean, I met a guy the other day. He'd had his franchise, a B2B franchise. I'll leave the name of the company out of it because it's not the company's fault. He had 400 coffee meetings in 10 and a half months, 400 with 0 referrals. And I said, I try not to have, I have an expressionless face, right? Because when you laugh at people, they shut down. And I'm like, I'm trying to collect data here because I think I can help the guy.
mhm.
And I said, what's the number where you decide I'm either not going to do this or I'm going to do it differently? Because to me, it's a lot less than 400.
Yes.
And he said, well, you don't know if they have leads for you until you meet with them. I'm like, oh, but you do. You do know. You screen who you're willing to meet with. More importantly, you want to be introduced to them. Talking to a guy the other day, he's a financial services guy, so I brainstormed with him who his best referral partners would be. And, I'm making him do the thinking. I already know the answer, but I'm making him do the thinking. And he quickly arrived at the conclusion that CPAs, would be good for him, right? And I said, that is absolutely correct. I said, so when you're out networking, you need to be asked to get introduced to CPAs. He goes, oh, I can do better than that. I'll belong to this international networking group. And, they've got a directory. I could find 600 of them right now. And I said, Jonathan, I didn't say meet a lot of CPAs. I said ask to be introduced, because the fact that he's part of an international networking group and they have chapters all over the globe and he can get to 600 immediately means when he calls them on the phone, what's his credibility level with these people?
0.
Zero. Zero.
0.
No different than if he didn't belong to the group. It
Yep.
means nothing.
Yep. Yeah. Introductions make all the difference.
We're
All
dealing
the
in
difference.
credibility. We're dealing in
Yes.
credibility.
Yeah. So I know that you've transitioned recently, kind of launched your own business, which is kind of like your former business kind of catapulted you into this newer business. Talk a little bit
Mhm.
about that. But before we do that, I need you to talk about those amazing swords that are behind you and the significance of them in your business.
These were sales awards. I took a summer job in 1988 and didn't quit for 15 years. And that was represents the business I ran in the 90s, meaning I was a 1099. It was someone else's brand name, but I still had my own, self-employed in every capacity. And these were sales awards. The vice president, his name was Mike Lancelot. That is his literal last name. And he was on an airplane, and you're of an age that you remember in-flight magazines and the accompanying publication, Sky Mall. Do you remember Sky Mall?
Yes, I do.
Right. So all these companies that you never heard of, Brookstone and Hammaker Schlemmer and Franklin Mint, had 4 pages, right? It wasn't their full catalog, but each had 2 or 4 pages. Well, Franklin Mint was selling a collector's edition, meaning we have more than one expensive trinket to sell you. And this one was Excalibur. If you can see all the way to the bottom, you see the little, plexiglass stone, adhered to the, sword in the stone. So Mike Lancelot went, ooh, Excalibur. We need to be using this, as a sales award. And so they did. And after I started, I would have one for every year this year I started. But they gave this away in 2001. They gave this away in 2002. They gave that one away in 2003. They used a different model for every year. And they went through so many of them, and they didn't want to start back through the list again, that they actually had to get the Franklin Mint to specially commission styles and designs just for our company so that they wouldn't have to start reissuing these again in year 10,
Because the Franklin Mint stopped them after year 10. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
well, yeah, they only had so many models, and we kept that
Yeah.
award program going for so long. We're like, we need more models. And
That's beautiful.
that was kind of fun. So it's what's behind me on the wall, because if it was the bookcase, I would then be under pressure to have very erudite and sophisticated books on the bookcase to look smart, right? and as it is, it's a dictionary and Microsoft Office, 11-in-1, user's manual. So, and or the other would be a picture of my wife, and I've got one. I want to get it up here, but I need to have it modified, because if you think this little bit of reflection is slightly annoying, the portrait I have is of course, sheeted in glass. I need to have it turned into one of those matte finishes, that kind of looks sort of like a painting, and hang that here instead. But if it were up to me, it would be a picture of my wife, because I spend more time looking at that wall through this camera than the other 3 walls of this office combined.
I want to see what I want to see. It always fascinates me, and here's why, because I don't know if I ever told you this. One of my husband's best friends bought him one of the Franklin Mint swords, I think when we were before we were even married. So yeah, we had one for the longest time around our house. It had a red handle and like a ruby stone in the handle. And so when I see your swords, it reminds me of that. But the significance behind that, it tells people that you have the sales experience and we're acknowledged for your ability to be successful in that sales field in your previous company. So bringing that kind of experience with you into now a business where you're helping people to be just as successful in their networking and relationship building is really powerful when you think about the significance of it. So
well, I mean, and I do think it makes, it's better than a bunch of, sophisticated books in terms of making me look serious. It's certainly a conversation piece. I like it because it reminds me that I am capable of achieving, and this is, that was, career number 1. I'm on career number 4 at this point. But yeah, the brand that I've, represented over the last 9 years is called Network in Action. Big fan of the brand, right? It's an international conglomerate of local and digital chapters of business growth communities. Big fan of that brand. But I realized that you can put the right people in the right room next to the right people all day long. And if they still don't have a pattern for going from nice to meet you to we could refer business to should we refer business to we will refer business to referring business, right? Then all you're doing is creating more opportunities for people to, get to know each other, right? And that's not important at all. We need to move well beyond that.
Right. And that's the significance. That's what a lot of people are struggling with when it comes to networking. It's how do we convert it into business? There's an organization that I used to belong to called The Tip, very much like BNI, and it's specifically a referral network. And I think they did an amazing job of educating people on how to refer one another and through relationship building. And I think there's a lot to be said for those types of networks, as long as you tap into what they are teaching you. There's a lot of education on the backside of it and following the people that are successful in those organizations as well. I think makes a big difference. So, and every network's different, and they have benefits, and some work, some don't. I love the fact that you are building a business based on what you see, that piece, that missing piece for a
Correct.
lot of people that are out there networking.
And I would certainly say that some, brands of, business growth communities, execute at a better level, and certainly chapter wise, right? Meaning the flavor
Mhm.
of Kool-Aid, in Denver may not be the same flavor of Kool-Aid they're serving here in my town. But I do believe that if it's a leads group, and most of them call themselves networking groups, and I would call them leads groups,
Yeah.
if the ability to get leads depends on your ability to be on the roster, meaning as long as you pay dues, you get leads, that's not a relationship, and it never will be. That is a consistent transaction, but relationships don't need rosters. So it's
Mm.
not important to me what room somebody's in. If you have the right strategy, I don't care what room you're in, because there are universal principles of building relationship with people. That means you can meet them anywhere, in a group or not in a group, in line at the grocery store, at the happy hour, at the coffee hour, at the chamber, or anywhere at all, and
On
build an effective
vacation.
relationship with them on vacation, and build an effective relationship with them, right? That
Mhm.
will produce those referrals. But it is true that some of those organizations have a better philosophy and a better practical guide to how to make that work. Now, the challenge is, how do you distribute that information through all the members, right? Because a lot of them are kind of inculcated in this networking slash marketing mentality, or worse, this leads group mentality, where they think all they have to do is introduce themselves to everybody in the room, and then the leads are going to flow. And if that's true, then again, it's a broken system, right? If there's no standard for the referral except you sit next to me every Wednesday at lunch, then that's a broken system. And
Right.
and so people are inculcated into, networking as marketing, or this is a leads group mentality, and the leads are supposed to be automatic. And so if that's not true, how do you, and there's an organization, I'll leave the name off until the contract's signed, but 1,300 members, 100 chapters around the country, and they're going to use me to do all the slash coaching and onboarding, because even though they've been in business, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years now, it's impossible for the leader to duplicate that energy down through every chapter,
Mm.
right? So we need somebody that's
Yeah.
dedicated to the work that, that I do, and can show people step by step, right? His version of how to do this well is about a 30 or 45-minute talk. My version is 7.5 hours of content spread over 12 weeks, right? You know,
Yeah. There you and because it does require that engagement, the repeatable strategy, the actual breaking down of how the conversations need to be developed and the relationships need to be developed over time. So I love that. So if today's conversation got you thinking about your brand, your message, or how you're showing up in the world, come check out the Brand Success Hub. It's my on-demand resource center packed with tools, training, and templates to help you get clear, consistent, and confident in your brand. And yes, Daniel has agreed to provide us with a 10-minute teaching moment, and he's going to be talking about the size and power of your network and understanding what it truly means. So just head over to the 30secondsuccess.com and click on the hub, and we'll see you on the inside. So, Daniel, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, why is it so hard for people to switch off their current networking efforts?
I suppose it's just because the length of the time that they've been seeing it modeled incorrectly,
Mm.
right? And what I think is absolutely fascinating is that when you meet somebody who's described as fully networked or very networked or one of the most networked people in the city, they're never out networking. They're not. They built their network, and they're back in their office taking care of their network and taking care of their clients, right? And as long as it's perceived as some form of marketing effort, then messaging is the critical component, and getting that message in front of as many people as possible is the critical component. Well, if you're thinking about marketing, doing it by hand, one person at a time, is the slowest, most expensive, most calorie intensive, right? If it's a live event, right? You're consuming calories and spending money that you didn't need to do, right? For no more result than as if you put a flyer underneath everybody's windshield wipers and gone home. right? How many times do you join an online, networking event and the first thing that happens, people just spam the chat box with this wall of text? I'm like, because it's a marketing effort and they think their messaging is what matters. When I teach people introduce me or I make introductions for other people, I said, it's not, if I need to explain who you are, then we're still at the marketing stage and not at the trust stage. If I need your bio to get them to agree to meeting with you, you're still thinking of this as we're passing a message along and not passing trust along. A good introduction is shorter than you think it is, and it's more direct than you think it is, right?
Absolutely.
People
Now you're
meet
speaking
with
my language.
Yeah, people meet with the people I recommend to them because they know that I don't make stupid introductions.
Right.
I mean, one of my favorite examples, Suzanne Taylor King, a mutual friend of ours, sent me one time, Daniel, comma, Rubin, comma, y'all both do big things. Do big things together. That was the whole intro. And I replied, I know better than to argue with STK, LOL, I booked. I mean, here's my link. And Rubin replied, I know better than to argue with STK, LOL, I booked. Because, and it's not that, the messaging had nothing to do with it, right? She didn't give him a paragraph about what a great guy Daniel was, and I didn't get a paragraph about what a great guy Rubin was. We both knew that not only did Suzanne Taylor King know her stuff, we knew that she knew what a good introduction meant to us. If she had just said Daniel Rubin, go, that'd have been enough.
Yep.
Because I know she doesn't do stupid intros.
Right. And you want to be known as a person who doesn't do stupid intros.
Then you don't do
So
stupid intros.
yeah, right. You don't do stupid intros. You want to make sure that you are giving quality introductions. One of the things that I think is really is maybe some advice that you can give our audience is what happens if you give an introduction and it falls flat or it doesn't work? How do you rectify a relationship when an introduction goes bad?
Okay, and there's a couple ways it can go bad. So let's use an example where I've decided that my friend Laura needs to connect with Billy Bob. Presumably, you're going to sell Billy Bob something, right? Billy Bob needs you. Okay, and so you're saying in the context, I've made the introduction. Hey, Billy Bob, this is my friend Laura Templeton. She's an expert at messaging, particularly around your first introduction to people in various contexts and formats. Based on the conversations you and I had at the coffee hour last week, it seemed to me that a little bit of finesse and expertise in this might be good for you, right? Hopefully you're willing to lean into this bit and see if what she has to offer teaches you anything, right? I suppose if you guys would take a short meeting, you could determine quickly if a longer meeting or an engagement is in order. I'll let you take it from here. So that's my basic intro, probably a little bit longer than it needed to be, right? I'm just kind of doing this off the cuff. So now you're saying that, and you've replied to that, hey, Billy Bob, Dan said nice things about you, said you really want to do well with your messaging efforts, right? That's my field of expertise. Would love to help you. Here's my link. And then you hear nothing from Billy Bob. Is that the context of an intro that didn't go anywhere? Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah, that's a great example. I've actually had a situation where I had someone who I referred, and it was just the person that I had referred them to. I don't know whether they were having an off day, but they were really rude to the person I had like the other person that I introduced. And it was really a strange situation. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? So in
Okay.
that
So in
situation,
this case,
so
in this context, the Billy Bob was rude. Billy Bob was like, screw you and the horse you rode
yeah,
in on. Is that what you're telling me?
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now, this sounds trite when I say it. That doesn't happen often. Number one, if
right.
it did
No, it
happen,
doesn't. Yeah,
number one, it would be true because I told you I met Billy Bob last week at the coffee hour and he didn't seem to know his shit, right? And you could teach him his
right,
shit, right? Meaning I acknowledged you before I ever made the intro. I don't know how much credit I have with Billy Bob, right?
right.
But those are rare introductions to be made at all. Meaning
Hmm.
I'm way more likely to send you to somebody that I've been working with, either formally or informally, a paid or unpaid basis. And I know they need you, and they know that I know that they need you. And I've told them, I mean, I had a guy, his first name happened to be Danny as well. And he said, what are some questions I can ask people before I introduce you, to see if they want to get introduced to you? And I said, I'd rather not. And he said, I thought you wanted intros. I said, Danny, I only want you to introduce me to people that you don't have to ask permission before you introduce me. And he said, that's not very many people. I said, I'm counting on that. Have you seen my calendar? There's not room for very many people on my calendar, right? Meaning I'm not going to make many intros that aren't of the same energy as Daniel, Rubin, y'all both do big things together, right? I'm not going to send you somewhere where I'm not 100% sure that Billy Bob's going to be like, oh, thank God, I've been looking to meet people like you, right? I'm just not. So if I did one and I got an unexpected result, meaning, I would loop back to the Billy Bob of the world and go, did I misunderstand what needs you have? I don't ever want to create an introduction, where you look, where it's not a good use of your time. I apologize if that seemed like it was not a good use of your time, right? It came as a complete shock to Laura because, I did not anticipate that particular reaction from you, right? But that might be on me, right? And I didn't understand what your needs are, right? And then let them go, nah, I was having a bad day, or you're right, Dan, you don't understand anything about me. Don't ever bother me again. Okay, that's fine. I'll take you off the list as quickly as I'll take you off the list quicker than I'll add you to the list, right? It's not a problem for me, right? I only want to deal with the people that have got the energy that I've got. But I would loop back, and I had one, I got onto somebody's calendar on a get to know you basis, right? And then his assistant jumped into the dialogue, which I don't have a problem with, and started treating it like a sales call where I was going to buy this guy's thing. Sent me, can I have your mailing address? Sent me, a videotape of all his testimonials, asked me to read, at least a couple chapters of his book. And I replied, I said, I'm actually going to decline the meeting because we're not meeting under the appropriate context. This is not how I was introduced to you. This is not where it's going.
Right.
And I CC'd the guy, and I'll use his initial, Billy Bob. Billy Bob's my fictional guy. I CC'd Billy Bob, who introduced me, right? And I said, when I said to them, you're going into this meeting thinking your guy's going to sell me something, and that's not how this is going to happen. And therefore, I'm actually going to actively decline the meeting. And Billy Bob got his feelings hurt. He's like, you made me look bad. I said, oh no, Ari made you look bad.
Yes.
I didn't make you look
Yes.
bad. Well, this guy's important. I said, well, his funnel's broken. That's all I know. His funnel's broken. Well, you could at least taken the meeting and told him his funnel's broken. I said, oh no, it's not my job to tell him his funnel's broken. I told him their funnel was broken when I declined the meeting. And sure enough, after the declined meeting, I got an onboarding email. I'm like, clearly their funnel is broken.
Right.
And I emailed back and I included Billy Bob on this too. And I said, clearly your funnel is broken because there is no onboarding because I did not even show up for that meeting. And Billy Bob was still offended. And I'm like, you don't really understand it. I said, I didn't make you look bad by declining the meeting. Ari made you look bad.
That's a perfect example. And I think, but the biggest thing is when, and I love that you hit on this, was how do you rectify the situation with the person that you have a relationship with? If it is one of those situations and you have a good relationship with someone, it can always be mended by quick phone call or a quick, hey, sorry,
Right. Laura, I
that
did not
went
expect that from
sideways.
Billy Bob.
Not
Right.
expect it. Perfect answer. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah.
I'll only
Thank
do
you.
ones that I know are going to respond correctly in the future.
Yeah.
Hey, at least we know something about Billy Bob. It's a good thing you didn't waste your time actually taking that meeting and then yelling at you,
Yep. So, as we wrap up, and I appreciate you so much, what's the best way for people to connect with you or go deeper into your work?
Ooh, you know what? If somebody will, are you going to be able to publish something online? I mean, that goes with this, or can you put a link? Okay, I'll throw it in the chat so you can grab it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give your team, anybody that's listening to this message at any point in time, I'm going to give them this gift. And that's a gift of what I call a network building business plan. I will spend 20 minutes teaching them the fundamentals of what they need to be doing. Okay. So you can copy that link and put it into, whatever, media you've got. It has the word client at the end because this is unpaid. Normally this is something I charge, several $100s for, but if they come through your channel, I will give them the gift of 20 minutes of my time to kind of point them in the right direction as far as what they could be doing. There is no sales pitch in that. I take it back. The entire sales pitch in that 20 minutes comes at the end where I will say these words. There's more where that came from. That's literally the entire sales pitch. So, if they like what they've got and they think it's enough, that's my gift to them. If they like what I got and they're like, there's got to be more, I'm like, here's a link. But my website in general, danielpatrickandrews.com, danielpatrickandrews.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
that information will definitely be in the show notes. So thank you. So before we go, what's a final thought of encouragement you would love to leave our listeners with?
It's simpler than you think it is, and it takes less time than you think it does. And your network is bigger than,
Perfect.
and your network is bigger than you realize.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Love that. Love that. Love that. Thank you. We'll definitely add that quote in the notes. So thank you
Thanks.
so much for joining us on the 30-Second Success podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's inspiring conversation. And until then, stand in your brand, trust your voice, and remember, success is just 30 seconds away.